Hello BookTube, it's Joshua here, and today I'm going to be doing the Snob O-Meter tag. This tag was created by Isaiah at That Reading Guy. It's a very good tag, and he tagged me, so thank you, Isaiah. I was also tagged by Pat at Book Chat with Pat, and thank you, Pat, for tagging me as well. Um, and I was very intrigued by this tag because I think it's the questions are very good, and it's an incredibly interesting topic to talk about. I would say that I have a history. I have a history with snobbery, both I think being one, or the very least having the temptation to be one, as well as being on the receiving end of snobbery. So I think I could contribute. I think I can contribute to this conversation. Um, so yeah, question one is, what is your definition of book snobbery? Um, and mine would be, well, I'm gonna steal one. I'm gonna steal a definition from one of Steve's older videos. He described snobbery as, I might get the wording wrong here, but I think what he said was an uncritical dismissal of a category. And I think that does sum it up in a very short sentence, or not even in a sentence, but in a very short line. So for example, if for books, if we're talking about for example, for books, categories in this sense would mean genres. So if you're dismissing an entire genre without reading it, without using your critical faculty, and you're just dismissing the entire genre of say science fiction, then that is snobbery. Of course, if it is critical, then like if you have actually gone and read lots of science fiction and you're dismissing it based off of justified reasons, then it isn't snobbery, because maybe then science fiction is actually bad as a category. Of course, I'm not saying that science fiction is actually bad as a category. I'm not very experienced with it, but I quite like science fiction. But I'm just using it as an example to illustrate what snobbery would look like, and to illustrate that difference between a critical dismissal and an uncritical dismissal. And so yeah, I'm just stealing this from Steve anyway. But I agree with that assessment. I also saw on Isaiah's video and on Pat's video that they brought up the idea of condescension. Being a snob involves being condescending to people, and I think that's a good definition, but I would also think that maybe that doesn't get to the heart of snobbery, because I think it might be possible to be a snob without necessarily condescending to someone else. I think if you don't have to necessarily look down on others to be a snob in your own reading interests. Just dismissing the entire genre of science fiction uncritically for yourself and never giving it a chance for yourself, regardless of how you talk to others about reading, I think that is an act of snobbery. So it isn't. So I think condescension can be a part of that, but that isn't the heart of what snobbery is. So yeah, that would be what I have to say in terms of defining snobbery. 2, is there a genre or type of book you would never consider reading? Maybe. Isn't a very good answer, I suppose. I don't. I'm thinking self-help books here. I don't know if I'd ever want to read a self-help book, but at the same time, I would never not. I would still potentially consider reading one. I'm not gonna rule out a self-help book just because it's self-help. I just find that most of the time those titles, just the way they're being advertised, what they purport to carry within them, just doesn't interest me. But I don't know, maybe one day there will be something, some kind of self-help book that intrigues me for whatever reason. So I'm never going to completely rule that out. But in general, yeah, if I were to be, I think, snobby towards a genre, I think self-help would be the genre that I'm snobby towards. So yeah. And there's an extension here. Such as, would you ever read a romance? Or if you regularly read romance, would you ever try a science fiction novel? Yes and yes, absolutely. I've read romance novels, and I've read science fiction novels, not to any great extent, but that is more a matter of time rather than any kind of dismissal. Yeah. 3. Does erotica count as literature? Yes. Well, okay. I watched Steve Donahue's video. I watched Steve Donahue's recent video for the Snob O-Meter Tag, and he mentioned that there would be that in this question there's two meanings of literature being implied here. The one is just lowercase literature, where it's just the writing of the day, no matter the quality. It's literature counts as anything that was written in this time period. In which case, of course, yes. But then if we're talking about capital L literature, so the more fancy stuff, I guess. In other words, I think what in that sense of the meaning, I think what is being asked here is, can erotica be aesthetically successful? I would say yes, because I could easily see a novel incorporating a sex scene, and that sex scene being part of the plot and actually maybe enhancing it, like in terms of, I don't know, in terms of character development, maybe, I don't know. But I could see it being incorporated into a novel and being done well. So I think, yes, I think it can. Erotica counts as literature in the lowercase term, and in the uppercase term, erotica can be written well. It can be aesthetically successful, I think. 4. Is it better to read classic books than popular bestsellers? So the key word here is better, because what does that mean? Better for who? Better in what way? If you mean better in terms of understanding literature, understanding the canon, then yes, because the canon is filled with works that have influenced most other works of literature, and have maybe even influenced society as a whole. So if you want to, if you mean better in terms of understanding, of learning more, yes, classics are better to read than popular bestsellers. But if you mean better as in better for each individual person, better in terms of what are you going to have more fun with, well, I mean, no, not necessarily. It depends on the person. If by better you mean to have fun, then it's completely up to it's completely up to the individual. So no, then in that case. 5. Have you ever bragged about reading a classic in order to sound smart? Maybe. I mean, I feel like that's something of what I'm doing on here. Like, just like whenever I show you guys a book, that's kind of bragging, isn't it? Because I'm just talking about it and just saying, hey guys, I read this. So I feel like, yeah. But also in a, maybe in like in a smug way, or like in a very, like, if this question means, have you ever bragged, or have you ever tried to show off and make yourself seem more well read than you are? I think maybe I have as well. I can't think of any particular instance, but I think it's very it's very likely that I have, because I felt that temptation to brag about reading a classic. Probably stemming from, and Steve mentioned this in his recent video, a lot of this stems from insecurities about reading, and I felt that absolutely. I hope that I have been able to restrain that impulse to be a snob, impulse to brag about books. But I don't know. I mean, maybe I miss these things. So I think I probably have at some point. And hopefully talking about it will help me restrain it farther. But yeah, probably. Do audiobooks count as reading? Yeah, do audiobooks count as reading? Well, no. Audiobooks do not count as reading because they are a different activity. For me personally, excuse me, I don't particularly like reading audiobooks, because when I'm reading a book, or when I'm experiencing a story, I want to see how it's written. I want to actually see the words on the page. I feel like you miss the grammar. Maybe this sounds really kind of pedantic to say, but I want to see whether the author has put a comma in a certain place, or a semicolon, or a colon, or a period. If you're listening to a story and the author just pauses after a clause, I want to see whether that's the end of a sentence, whether it's actually only a semicolon separating that. I mean, that's just one example. Maybe that sounds a little bit ridiculous, but I feel like I want to actually see the page and see what has actually been written down, rather than just having it read out to me. That's my preference, of course. But if we're talking about definitions here, do audiobooks count as reading? No, because I mean, if you were to look into a dictionary, reading is where you use your eyes to look at words on a page. Audiobooks is listening. It's not reading. It's listening. It's a different action. But if we're talking about the validity of the experience of a story, then yeah, totally, it's valid. Of course, you can read audiobooks. I wouldn't look down on anyone for that. It's totally cool. What about comic books or graphic novels? Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, I'll pretty much mimic Steve's answer here by saying, well, yeah, in most comic novels there are words on the page, and so yeah, that is reading. And so yeah, I mean, but if there aren't words on the page and it's just photos, well then I guess it's more of a picture book rather than a comic book, and in which case you're not really reading, you're looking. But yeah, I mean, they count as experiencing a story. Absolutely. Have you ever looked down, and actually for that last question, there's a totally, I mean, like, for snobs who look down at comic books, I think that's kind of ridiculous, because a lot of artistry goes into illustrating those things, and they can look really nice. So I don't see, I mean, of course they're completely valid. I just wanted to add that because I really admire people who can draw and who are good artists, because I can't do it at all. But I think it's so cool when people can, and I love looking at visual art. So yeah. 7. Have you ever looked down at someone for reading a popular fluff book? A book with little substance to it. For example, a self-help book or a celebrity memoir. No. I really don't think so for this one. Because I know people in my life. I have my family members. I've seen my family members reading celebrity books, celebrity memoirs, because it interests them. I would never want to look down at them for that. I mean, they are entirely everyone is entirely within their own right to read what they want. It's their own interests. Who am I to say what they should read or not? And Steve brought up that was my initial response to this, but I just recently watched Steve's recent Snob O-Meter video, and he mentioned also that celebrity memoirs can be good books. They aren't fluff. They aren't necessarily fluff books. So yeah, that would be my answer. Yeah. Have you ever been the recipient of someone else's snobbery? Yes. Although interestingly, I haven't really encountered too many snobs, or I haven't been condescended to, if we're taking that aspect of the definition of snobbery. I haven't been condescended to by very many book people in general, which is kind of surprising, because again, to reference Steve Donahue's video again, he mentioned how a lot, like when he was younger, a lot of bookish people were snobs to him, but I actually haven't had that experience. I mean, no one has ever been a snob to me on BookTube. No one has ever done that. And also in my personal, not personal life. I hope I'm being personal on here as well. But in my in-person life, I don't think I've encountered too many people who I haven't encountered bookish people who have been snobs to me. In my university, where I found some people who read regularly, they haven't been snobs to me. I have been condescended to by people who don't read. That has happened a couple times with a couple of different people. which I don't really know how to take. So, but yeah, that has happened. Um, what question am I on? Would you ever be friends with a snob? Maybe you already are. Yeah, I would be friends with a snob as long as it doesn't actually get in the way of being friends, of being jovial with someone. I have a friend who I think might describe himself as a snob. Um, I think I have someone, I'll have to ask him, but yeah, he has interesting, I don't know, he has interesting ideas, but he doesn't act in a condescending way ever to me. So whatever he calls himself, I don't care because he's a nice guy. Um, so yeah, I would be friends with the snob, and I think I might already be, um, and as long as it's not like as long as it's not annoying to be around them, then yeah, I'll be friends with them. Um, 10. Are people who don't read less sophisticated than people who do? No, absolutely not. Because I'm 100% sure that there are people who don't read, who are intelligent and who are kind and who are phenomenal people. And I'm also 100% sure that there are people who do read who are horrible, awful, nasty a-holes. So, no. People who do read are not more sophisticated than people who, yeah. People who don't read are not less sophisticated than people who do. Yeah, that is all I have to say about that. Okay, and that's it. Measure yourself based on your answers to the previous 10 questions. Would you qualify as a book snob? Well, I don't know. I think maybe. Because why do I think maybe? Well, I think I try not to be, but I have felt and I've caught myself, I think, being a snob, especially with the which one was it? Have you ever bragged about reading a classic in order to sound smart? I think I've definitely done that. I probably, because I've noticed that insecurity about books in myself. I've noticed the impulse to be a snob. I've noticed that kind of thing. But at the same, and especially when I was just beginning to read, when I was just getting into it, I very much viewed books as a kind of well, Steve Donahue mentioned this in his video. I'm referencing his video a lot, but it's useful because he gave very good answers. Steve Donahue mentioned that the notion that book snobs often take into themselves is that reading makes you morally superior. Well, I think when I first got into reading, that idea was in my head, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to initially read. I think that was the case, and so I've definitely recognized that in myself. I think it's just a matter of restraining myself and not letting that impulse and not letting that way of thinking actually determine the way I function or talk to others, or not let that determine my reading. Because I want to read romance novels, I want to read science fiction novels. I don't want to close myself off to those things. That would be bad. That would be horrible. And so yeah, I think that's everything. Yeah, I really enjoyed this tag. Thank you, Isaiah, for making it. And I'm not going to tag anyone because I didn't draw up a list before this. I just kind of started recording at random. But I will say that if any of you haven't made, actually, I thought of one channel just now. I will tag David Novak. I will tag him because I don't believe he's done this, unless he has. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll check after the video. But I'll say also in general, if any of you see this tag and want to make a video of it, please do. The conversation is always wide open. So yeah, that'll be it. Thank you for watching BookTube, and goodbye.